Hello and welcome to the Predictable B2B Success Podcast brought to you by Spratwith.com. I'm Vinay Koshi and our guest today is Subra Krishnan. Subra, you are the co-founder and CEO of Lemnisk. And as I understand it, Lemnisk offers a real-time marketing automation built on a customer data platform. Now, for listeners, Subra's had well over 2 decades worth of experience building and scaling deep tech products and teams, including over a decade in big data, machine learning, and marketing technology systems. You've had quite the background in the tech space. So Subra, I'm curious, was there a particular event that triggered this whole trajectory of building a customer data platform to allow for real-time marketing automation?
Firstly, Vinay, thanks for having me on the show. Really appreciate it. I'm excited to do this podcast with you today. As you rightly said, thanks for a very kind intro. Appreciate it. And I think over the last 2 decades, like you said, I think it is a connect the dots moment, I would say, what we're doing right now. Right. You could say that all of the experiences that I've had in big data first and then in digital marketing at scale in the ad tech space, all of those experiences have probably created that aha moment for me, which sort of allowed me to really build on Lemnisk as we are doing today. And I think historically, if you look at it, going back to my own background, I started my career in big data back with this Austin-based firm called Trilogy, where we were really trying to exploit user behavior on automotive microsites to influence what kind of trims eventually come out of the factory so that there is just that right amount of value creation and there is no money left on the table. And I think that, and after that, with that sort of experience, I moved into the ad tech space where we were doing dynamic sort of retargeting for e-commerce players, where we would retarget them on users that have dropped off without buying products. We would find them on other websites and show targeted messages to them. So I think these experiences and the associated programmatic bidding algorithms and sort of collaborative filtering recommendation algorithms that I helped build really made me understand the impact and power of data. And so walking into Lemnisk, the big insight that we had was that if we could really combine or understand a user across all of the touch points that the user has with a particular brand and really collate all of that and make it available in real time for analysis and insight, then there could be an incredible amount of value that gets unlocked. And due to a variety of reasons, technological reasons, it wasn't possible. And so that probably led me and my co-founders to really walk into this space. And I think we had the benefit of combined nearly 3 or 4 decades of experience that told us that what we were doing was right. Yeah.
So I wonder if you could just elaborate on that, because I'm sure listeners are going, you know what, we've got Salesforce, we've got Marketo and all these other solutions. There's a lot of data being produced. Why do I need a customer data platform on top of all of that in order to facilitate marketing automation?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And it's probably the topmost sales objection that we probably get as well. And I think the answer to that is very simple. The answer is that all of these tools that marketers use, and typically the enterprise marketer out there uses anywhere between 12 to 30 different marketing tools. And the problem is that while each one of these tools in and of itself is a fantastic one, that oftentimes these are very well proven enterprise tools, but these tools are not really designed or geared to talk to each other meaningfully or orchestrate with each other intelligently. Certainly not. You need one central system of intelligence from where you can really orchestrate individual customer experiences. And I think that is really where players like independent CDPs like Lemnisk come to the picture.
So if I understand this correctly, it's not just a customer data platform, but it's a platform that you're able to assign key metrics for your business to, that allows you to then filter the appropriate data points that you're looking for. Would that be a correct or a fair interpretation?
That is exactly the right way of looking at it, because I think quite often one of the common misconceptions about customer data platform is it gets equated to a CRM in certain cases or to data lakes in other cases. But that is really not what a CDP is. A CDP really is almost like a living, breathing entity that basically is continuously listening to customer signals from different data sources and channels, from the website, from the app, and from emails, from CRM systems. So it's really continuously processing, absorbing, and listening to these signals. And therefore, you can literally model your business outcomes as a series of rules in the system, and those get triggered at appropriate points in time to really ensure that you extract value out of every marketing moment of truth that is out there.
I'd love to dive into it a bit more, but I'm also curious, given your journey to date, what would you say is your personal area of strength?
I mean, by nature, I'm a product guy. I'm a product guy at heart. So what I really do well is build products. So I'm happiest when I'm discussing specs, discussing business requirements with clients and converting them into a beautiful end product that creates value. And I think I guess my own background, I'm an engineer by training, and practically I spent my entire career in technology and managing big data. So I think it allows me to give those tools and frameworks that I can actually build high-tech products and big data products. So I guess that is my strength.
And in that area of strength, what would you say is something that businesses don't know, but should?
I think I would probably say that what many businesses don't realize is that I think many people look at, especially if you look at marketing and in this day and age, I think many people do not understand or maybe do not realize yet that you don't necessarily have to wait for a moment of truth opportunity to happen for you to intervene, that you can, using machine learning and big data, literally create those opportunities. And I think that is probably the one big insight that probably many marketers or many business folks that try to create a world-class customer experience don't realize. And I think for me, that is that one big realization, that you can actually create those opportunities to reach out to consumers.
I believe you gave us an example of the manufacturing industry and being able to produce automotive parts. But I was wondering if for those of us in the B2B space, could you give us another example of the kind of impact it actually makes on a customer?
Yeah, sure. Look, for example, if I were to take B2B, there are a bunch of situations you could look at. Like, for example, a classic CDP use case in the B2B space would be the ability to stitch behavior of a prospect across different sources, specifically across an anonymous source and maybe a known source. So, for example, a prospect could have visited the sort of your B2B website, submitted a lead, and 2 days later, you could have the same prospect come back and research a bit more, right? So you could argue that there is that extra behavior that the user is exhibiting, and to really understand that and latch onto that intent, you need to really stitch these two disparate events, one of which is that the user downloaded a piece of content, and the next is that the user is actively researching on your website. So this is one opportunity. A second could be, how do you, for example, email an account or people in an account, recognizing that somebody from that company is actually actively researching about your brand. So what does it mean for how you score those leads of the other people in that account? So I think these are all ways and means in which a CDP can drive extra value in a B2B context. I hope that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Really, it boils down to things like retention, of course, conversions, and actual engagement over a period of time. So those are the key outcomes that a company would be looking for.
Yes. So the metric could be acquisition oriented, or it could be retention / upsell, cross-sell oriented. Typically would be one of these metrics. You could also look at churn prevention, which is again a very important use case. So I think that, of course, is a third area as well.
Would you say that all marketing needs to be real-time marketing?
I think going back to what we were discussing. So I think real-time is important when there is a moment of truth, right? So I think a good way to see if real time is needed or not is to understand whether there is really a moment of truth that's emerging. And that's where I think what most people don't realize is that you can create those moments of truth and not just wait for one. For example, you could know that while, of course, you might be trying to target 1,000 users at the same time, you could know that user number 1 could be targeted at 9 a.m. in the morning via email, whereas user number 2 could be targeted at 6 p.m. via maybe an app push notification. So I think real time, as long as you recognize that there are these moments at which you can reach out to the user, or the user has otherwise created that opportunity for you, maybe by exhibiting a specific behavior like visiting the website or by opening an email. So I think it's in those situations as well that you can use real time as a very powerful tool to produce extra value.
Okay. And I know you...
No, I'm sorry, but so I think, so just to finish that point, So I think a better question could probably be, so instead of asking, does all marketing need to be real time? I think a good question to ask is, how can I convert every communication that I have with my customers into real time? And if I can, I should, right? And so it's ultimately about setting up those trigger points in your in your marketing platform through a CDP or otherwise that allows you to either create or exploit real time.
Just on that, I guess the biggest issue companies would have is that dealing with the sheer volume of queries, especially as they scale and grow. Automation can certainly help, but in my experience, it needs to be approached somewhat cautiously in that you could overdo the automation side of things and lose that connection. So how would you recommend companies balance up the idea of automation while still having a handle and a personal touch and oversight over the whole process?
It's interesting you should ask that, because I think we actually have done a lot of A/B tests and experiments on what kind of models work best when you think of customer experience. So for example, we experimented with pure human rules with pure machine learning, and then certain hybrid situations where you have machine learning, but you have these overlaying interventions which are intelligent rules defined by human beings. And believe it or not, the third model, which is you have machine learning, but you have those meaningful interventions by humans, is the one that performs best. So I think there is a case to be made for what you're saying, which is that you want to be automating, you want to have machine learning drive a lot of your outcomes, but you also want to have intelligent sort of checks and balances in place. And they could again take one or two forms, right? So for example, it could be in the form of specific caps that you put in place, for example, or limits that you put on communication. And that could be very marketing driven. Or it could be there is a human that really understands the consumer perspective and puts in place those checks and balances. A great example in a B2C context could be, look, while I have machine learning driving all sorts of upsell, cross-sell messaging, but the moment there is a customer service complaint, all marketing has to stop. Right. Or the moment the user has bought something, there has to be a cool-off period of 72 hours. So I think those are the kind of checks and balances which only come, a machine learning would never be able to appreciate it or sort of understand it, because that's not the job of an algorithm. But that is really where you can have these intelligent human interventions, right? Or a sort of a complaint service request on another system triggering a complete stop in communication. So I think that's probably the right sort of mix and the way to look at this.
Just from what you're saying, my takeaway would be that really to begin to look at implementing something like Lemnisk in your company, you really need to have your customer journey very well mapped out across all touch points. Would that be an absolute prerequisite?
Yeah, yes. And to the extent that you can define it along with Lemnisk or using Lemnisk. But it absolutely helps to, it's a two-step process. And that's at least my experience, that you don't need to map everything right up front. but you need to do it incrementally. Like, for example, there is no need to take a big bang approach where you conduct this experiment of orchestration or sort of setting up these journeys, but really you can understand your business outcomes, what do you want to achieve, and start with one metric and really sort of think in terms of value creation in the context of that metric, and therefore set up a one simple journey that is good and works across touch points and measure it, see that you're getting the value, move on to the next and move on to the next. And pretty soon, over a few quarters or a few months, depending on how fast you move, you have this set of 20, 25 always on use cases that come from a deep understanding of user journeys, and that sort of have a compounding effect on your business metrics.
Lemnisk is positioned as offering real-time marketing automation, but with all that insight that you're able to capture on your CDP, would it be possible for it to be implemented across other departments as well? And I'm thinking customer success, sales, even customer service, maybe.
Yeah, in fact, I think one of the important sort of developments that we are seeing as we get into mature CDP implementations with our customers is that other sort of functions and business units within an organization start asking for access to CDP data and insights as well. Because when we start, generally it is in a customer experience context, which means either the head of digital or the CMO or somebody in sort of this line of function would want a CDP. But quickly, the CDP is expanding to other situations as well. Like, for example, you can stream customer data into the analytics division so that their upsell, cross-sell recommendations that they're trying to put in place becomes better through a deeper understanding of data that is powered by the CDP. Or, for example, if you take the example of a bank, for example, the branch wants to make every walk-in more memorable, more personalized, and so they want access to CDP data, right? So I think you are looking at other divisions and functions. In the case of insurance, for example, we are talking to one of the insurance clients that we have that is potentially looking to leverage CDP data to improve their underwriting capabilities. And these are all POCs and experiments, but I clearly the value of CDP and its use cases will start going beyond marketing into these other functions as well. That's something that we are seeing happening for sure. Yeah.
And in terms of creativity, because I would assume that given certain moments, there is the opportunity to be creative. And I'm thinking of the well-documented and somewhat famous Super Bowl where the lights went out and the Oreo ad came out, you can still dunk in the dark sort of thing, or the NASA responding to the broomstick challenge, etc., which was a very much almost instantaneous based on comments or posts people were putting up there. How does CDP enable such things, if at all? Or is that pretty much left to creative marketing folk within the company?
I think it's something that will happen over the next few years for sure, where, look, let's be very clear. For example, there is a very creative aspect to marketing that can never be replicated. Of course, you've got Dolly now creating these fantastic creative paintings. I don't know if you've seen that. You should check it out if you haven't. But I think there are certain elements of marketing which I think we can confidently say is purely in the creative domain. But I think what can happen, and to your example of Super Bowl advertising, is the CDP and technologies like big data and machine learning can produce better outcomes or inform decision making around these creative decisions that eventually get taken. For example, it could come from a deeper understanding of your audience, that you might be able to sharpen your understanding of what kind of customer profile buys your product, and then therefore feed that into the creative process. And a very interesting example of this could be, for example, TV analytics, right? Today, a lot of television or advertising is happening on OTT channels, right? Or, for example, the call to action out of any regular TV ad could be a visit to a website. So you could run, for example, one bout of media campaigns and ingest the exact slots at which you showed TV ads, like for example, 9 p.m. On Star TV for Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. So you literally know the time at which an ad on TV, and you can overlay that with all of your digital signals. Like, did you see a spike in website visits or app downloads in those moments? And then you can look at, for example, those channel and sort of program combinations or content combinations that worked for you, and then feed that into the next media cycle to produce better outcomes. So in this case, what you're clearly seeing is that a very creative process of TV advertisements and grabbing attention via television ads can be improved by combining it with sort of real-time data about what's actually happening on the ground. So this is just one simple example, but hopefully that answers your question.
My takeaway again would be that it really speaks to this idea of governance, especially of content. And I say that because the vast majority of content that most companies produce tends to lay in the archive, so to speak, gathering a bit of digital dust, in that only about 20% or so, maybe even less, of it actually does anything for a company. Yet, if I look at the cost of actually producing a lot of this content, whether it's support or even published on a website, it could be a million or multi-million-dollar asset. But from what you were saying, we could really govern the production and assign specific roles to each piece of content based on the data that we're getting, and on acquiring new data, use that to improve our existing content, as opposed to just getting into this whole mill of producing new content because we need a publishing arm in our business.
Yeah, and that's the right way of looking at it, which is, I think we can all agree that creative as a function is going to survive and thrive more than ever in this day and age. Irrespective of any other developments on the machine learning or AI front, creative is going to be inherently very human and is likely not replicable, right? Now, what we can do, however, is improve the creative output by taking intelligent decisions, data-driven decisions. And yeah, that's a very good way of looking at it.
This has been very enlightening, Subra. I'm just thinking, is there a aspect, or perhaps even aspects, around data-driven marketing, real-time marketing, and CDPs, of course, that probably doesn't get talked about very much, but should? If so, what would they be?
People are developing an intuitive understanding of the fact that real time is useful, hyper-personalization is useful, etc. But I think quite often what probably gets missed out is how to actually go about doing it. I think the big challenge that marketers have today isn't a lack of awareness that this is important, but how to actually go about doing it. And I think till about maybe a few years back, due to a variety of reasons, starting from the cost of computation all the way down to other kind of lack of frameworks, etc., it wasn't possible to do this. And I think it is possible to do it now. That the holy grail of marketing is something that we're living right now. And so it is possible to do it. But it's really about implementation. It's really about having the vision to really bring your data and marketing campaigns under one central umbrella and being able to execute it in a centralized, coordinated fashion, as opposed to doing it in silos. And number one. And number two, it's about doing it in a stepwise, incremental, experimental mindset manner than trying to take a big bang approach. And I think all of our collective experience with successful clients that have managed to derive value out of a CDP tells us exactly this, that it is possible, and that you need to have an experimental sort of continuously iterating process to sort of drive value out of real-time marketing.
From your experience, would you say it is important to have someone champion the process within the company, and that champion might not necessarily be the CEO or the CMO? It could be someone else within the organization.
Absolutely. And I think we're now starting to get into some of the implementation aspects of why some organizations succeed and why some don't. Invariably, and I can say this with a lot of confidence, that successful implementations of real-time marketing CDP are almost invariably top-down, where
Right.
there is a very strong CEO mandate or a CMO mandate or otherwise a very senior mandate of somebody championing this cause and adopting it as their own and prioritizing it and evangelizing it within the organization. And I think the reason is that something like this cannot be bottoms up for the simple reason that it spans multiple marketing organizations or marketing functions. For example, it's hard for somebody that is, let's say, doing email marketing to look at it holistically and say, I want my chatbot, I want my website, I want my app, and I want my call center to all be talking together. And so it really is a top-down mandate for sure. And that when we speak of digital transformation being successful top-down, it applies for these kind of CDP implementations as well.
Certainly. Okay. With something like a CDP and real-time marketing, obviously you need a good strategy in place overall. But would you say that the other part or another part of the equation is to have a really good or I would say strong fundamentals in terms of marketing strategy in order for an organization to succeed with implementing real-time marketing?
So, yes, because I think any use case executed in isolation without an underlying cohesive marketing strategies is probably going to produce isolated, unpredictable impact. So a good marketing strategy really stems from understanding, the way we see it is that understanding business outcomes and linking it to specific marketing outcomes that you want to achieve, and then converting those marketing metrics and outcomes that you want to achieve into a series of micro objectives or micro use cases. So I think, again, having a sound underlying goal, like for example, saying that, okay, the business might say, I want to grow 2x this year, but then saying that, okay, if a business wants to grow 2x, then that means I need to look at my marketing data and conclude that, okay, I need to improve my mid-funnel, I need to reduce my mid-funnel drop-offs by 30%, and I need to improve my conversion rate from 1.5 to, let's say, 1.9%. And I think a combination of these two metrics can really contribute towards doubling that goal. And then you go to the next step where you say, okay, you know what, if I need to reduce mid-funnel drop-offs by, let's say, 30%, what's happening right now? What are those important sort of points in the journey where I am actually experiencing drop-offs? Why is that happening? And how can I detect it and prevent it through the right nudges and through the right messaging? And the same goes for bottom of the funnel. So in this case, you're starting from business outcome and slowly you're starting to work your way down to those concrete micro goals. And so therefore, everything is cohesive, right? You know exactly why you're doing a use case and how it directly links to doubling revenue.
Yep. In your experience and observation, would you say that you're noticing some of these companies that do implement the use of these platforms have their marketing and sales teams become more aligned or operate as one unit?
I think what's happening is, I think the classic marketing and sales, do they fundamentally become more aligned? I don't know about that. There is always that friction that probably is going to exist, at least in a B2B context for sure, for some of your customers that would be audiences that would be listening in. But I think what it does is it informs, for example, marketing through the use of platforms like this is able to inform sales and is able to produce more intelligence for sales to consume. And therefore is able to, and it's not just static intelligence, like at points, discrete points in time, but it's real-time intelligence. So, for example, you're able to tell a salesperson that, okay, this customer was researching about that's currently that you're talking to in your sales cycle, and that's currently in a proposal stage, there was a visit, right? And so now probably is a good time to do an ABM or call that champion and speak to them. So I think those are the kind of intelligent ways in which sales and marketing are starting to align using platforms like Lemnisk.
To wrap things up, Subra, if you were listening to this episode, what would you say would be your top takeaway?
Well, I think my top takeaway out of this last 40 minutes of conversation would be threefold. Number one, you have to create, not just wait for marketing moments of truth, number one. Number two, to be able to really deliver a world-class sort of customer experience, you have to organize all of your customer data into one single place and all of your customer journeys in one single place. And number three is that you need business alignment top down and at a metric level to be really able to produce successful outcomes. So I guess those would be probably the best sort of takeaways for me.
Thanks for that. And if listeners are curious and want to find out more or connect with you, where would you recommend they head to?
Sure. We are on www.lemnisk.co. That's LEMNISK.co. You can also email us at marketing@lemnisk.co. We are also there on Twitter at Lemnisk121 and on LinkedIn. Feel free to hit me up as well. I'm on at Subra Krishnan on Twitter and on subra.krishnan@lemnisk.co. So yeah, feel free to email me as well.
Terrific. Subra, thanks so much for this. It's been very enlightening.
Thanks for having me, Vinay.